Hello, it's Randi Rhodes. Here's a clip from our show, and go to randirhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.
Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
A surprise twist in the sentencing of fired National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. Just moments ago, the judge in this case, Judge Sullivan, agreeing to delay Flynn's sentencing. Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller's team is asking the court to go easy on Flynn. They've recommended a sentence of little or no jail time, and now Flynn's lawyer has taken the judge up on his offer of a delay in sentencing so that Flynn can continue to cooperate. I want to bring in CNN senior White House correspondent Pamela Brown. We have our crime and justice reporter Shimon Prokupez with us as well. They're both outside of the federal courthouse there in Washington. Shimon, explain this to us. What happened?
It's hard to explain, right? It's kind of been a wild morning here. Certainly nothing any of us expected here this morning, that the judge would go ahead and delay this. Clearly, the judge kept sending signals to Michael Flynn, to his attorneys, that it might be a good idea to delay this. He was not happy about a lot of things, perhaps, not entirely clear. He was using words like treason, and then accusing Michael Flynn of being working as a foreign agent while at the White House. Not true. He had to walk that back. The judge, he had to walk back other statements he made. And then in the end, he kept insisting, look, the judge did too, Michael Flynn's attorney, if you think you want to delay this, just let me know. And eventually, that's what happened. One of the things to keep in mind here is because Michael Flynn is still cooperating in a case involving his associates who were just charged yesterday, the judge thought maybe it might be a good idea to wait until that cooperation is over so that his attorneys, so that Michael Flynn's attorneys could come in and explain more about that cooperation, because it could be favorable to Michael Flynn. And it's clear, and it's very clear here, that this was not going the way Michael Flynn expected. And perhaps the judge here said, you know what, let me give you a break, take some more time, because I think what ultimately would have happened is the judge was ready to sentence him to jail.
Absolutely. That was amazing. That was so crazy. Now, you got to remember that Michael Flynn has been cooperating with Robert Mueller, that he sat down with Robert Mueller for 60 plus hours, 19 different interviews, and is helping on 3 different investigations. And we don't know what they are because they were redacted in the sentencing advice that Mueller provided to the court to, say, listen, he's really giving us substantial cooperation. And this is what led me to think that maybe Flynn, who stayed at the White House after Sally Yates told Don McGahn and the White House that Flynn was a liar and that he was compromised by Russia. He was literally compromised because he was talking to the press. He was out in front. He was saying things in public that the Russians knew were false to cover for deals he was doing with Russia. And therefore, he was blackmailable by the Russians, and having him as our national security advisor was a really stinking bad idea. She ran to the White House a couple days after this FBI interview was conducted at the White House with Michael Flynn and 2 FBI agents. One of them, Andy McCabe, the other one was Struck, okay? And so the President of the United States did not let Flynn go. He didn't. He kept him there for another 3 weeks. Now, it's interesting that perhaps during that period of time, Flynn had either gathered information inside the White House, which he then provided to Mueller, wore a wire, and had communications, which we don't know, but whatever it is that Flynn did do, he did it and provided information to Robert Mueller on 3 different investigations. Now, I can assume one of them was that he wanted to kidnap the Turkish cleric, Mr. Gulen, who lives in Pennsylvania, because yesterday, 2 of Michael Flynn's associates, who apparently did not get the soft cell treatment from Mueller, they're going to jail, and those 2 are going to jail for a really stinking long time. You got these 2 guys who One's name is Bijan Kian, and the other one is Camille Akim Alptekin. And they were running, a whole Turkish lobbying campaign that was originally called the 90-Day Truth Campaign. They later renamed it Project Confidence. That began in July of 2016. Now, Flynn was with Donald Trump the whole time. So Flynn was there in July of 2016 as the national security advisor to the president's campaign. This now is, what we're talking about currently is already Michael Flynn in the White House during the administration lying to the FBI. But prior, when he was on the campaign and screaming "lock her up" at all these rallies, he was working with these two guys who just got like major freaking prison time. Bijan Kian, he's looking at 15 years in the slammer, and Camille Alptekin, he's looking at 30 years. 30 years of imprisonment. And in these charging documents, Flynn is identified as person A. And they say person A, Flynn, was heavily involved in the lobbying operation. They did not indict him along with these two other associates because they separated his case out and prepared him to cooperate, or asked him to cooperate in exchange for not being named in one of these cases, which this is what I'm saying. I suspect it's the Turkish case. And Flynn agreed to be a substantial cooperator with Bob Mueller. So it's not just about lying to the FBI in the White House while he was the national security advisor. This guy was also a lobbyist for a foreign government that was, planning. First, they were saying that they would, try to extradite this Gulen, who's done nothing wrong. There's nothing, Mr. Gulen lives in Pennsylvania quietly, and he has absolutely no criminal record. He has nothing. He's not on a watch list. He's just a cleric, okay? That's all he is, and he obeys all the laws of the United States, so they couldn't get him extradited. In fact, they had asked Obama, the Turkish government had, to extradite him, and Obama said, if you have any information that this man has done anything wrong while he was in the United States or even in Turkey, then we will consider it. And they never produced any information that the Obama administration could follow up on to, extradite this man. So that was case closed. But Erdogan wants this man because he believes that a near coup, which almost succeeded in Turkey, was planned somehow in Pennsylvania by this guy. Well, this thing escalated to the point where Flynn and these two guys were going to kidnap him. They literally were going to take him and kidnap him. So Flynn's not charged in this kidnapping scheme, but these two other guys are, and one's looking at 15 and the other one's looking at 30 years in federal prison. So that's one of the things I imagine. Now, the other two investigations, one obviously has to do with Russia and interference and contacts with all these 16 people in the Trump orbit, all these 16 people on the campaign, all these people in the White House, all these people, and I don't know what the third one is. I really don't know what the third one is. But the judge was so disgusted today, that he literally asked Flynn's attorneys if they'd ever considered that their client would be charged with treason. And the lawyer stood there, and the lawyer was like, we can't answer a hypothetical. Really? I mean, this is unbelievable. This was insane. And the judge said that the seriousness of what Flynn did as a high-ranking officer with the DIA, the Director of National Intelligence, the Director of the Intelligence Agency, the DIA that oversees all the other, and that he had worked with the FBI, and that this guy knew what he was doing and did it anyway. And here's a really creepy thing. Kislyak, who is this ambassador? Of course Kislyak was surveilled while he was in the United States. All Russians are, not all Russian citizens, but all Russians with ties to the government who are here under diplomatic immunity because they're still Russian and they're working for Putin, their phones are tapped. They try and avoid it. That's why all this talk about back channels. Let's open a back channel, said Eric Prince in the Seychelles. Then Jared, let's open a back channel. Let's do this. Let's do it in the Russian embassy in New York. I mean, because they wanted to evade the prying eyes and ears of our national intelligence agencies, which Flynn was part of in the Obama administration before he was fired. Now, the White House, and the Flynn lawyers, they're talking to each other. I don't care what anybody tells you. They're talking to each other. Sarah was there yesterday. Sarah is like out on the White House lawn, and she's like, they entrapped Flynn, and, this should be thrown out because Comey is the most corrupt guy. Comey, who Trump asked, can you let Flynn go? Can you let him go? And when Comey would not pledge loyalty to Donald Trump and say he would let Flynn go, and obviously Flynn is a traitor. He is somebody who was using an enormous amount of authority as our national security advisor to betray the American people. That is what he did. And the judge was like, this is so disgusting. And he was so angry that he said to Flynn's lawyers, maybe we ought to take a recess. And when we come back, and during that recess, maybe you ought to think about, I'm not going to let Flynn go either. I know Mueller thinks he gave substantial cooperation. That's wonderful. But still, the crimes he committed against the American people are so disgraceful and so disgusting, and that he was a national security advisor to the President of the United States, and prior to that, he was the Director of National Intelligence, and prior to that, he worked with the FBI, and that you're going to stand here and make some argument that he didn't know lying to the FBI was a crime, even though Kislyak's phones were tapped, and, they went in there and they were saying, before McCabe sat Flynn down, Flynn had been lying for 2 weeks in public. Flynn had lied to David Ignatius at the Washington Post. Flynn had lied to Pence. Flynn had lied to Reince Priebus. Flynn had lied to Sean Spicer. He had lied and lied and lied because they all needed to have an answer for how come everybody, including the Washington Post, is reporting that you had secret meetings with Kislyak and that you didn't disclose these. And on the your FARA form, okay, when he was applying for a security, he lied on those forms too. He kept lying, knowing that to lie on those forms was a criminal offense, right? And they needed an answer, and he was lying. So for 2 weeks, the FBI was listening to Flynn lie. 2 weeks before they ever even interviewed him. Then McCabe called him up. And McCabe said, hey, listen, we've heard you lying over the past 2 weeks. We heard the same false statements that you made to the Washington Post, made to the public, made to Reince Priebus, made to Sean Spicer. And we also see that you made false statements on national television, on Face the Nation, January 15th, 2017. Swear to God, this is what's in the complaint, right? And so we need to come to, we need to talk to you. We can come to you at the White House if you want. But we need to talk to you. And we need to have you explain why you're lying. Flynn asked McCabe if the questions would concern, and this is in quotes, would the questions concern my contact with the Russian ambassador to the United States? Andy McCabe said, yes, it will. Yes, this will. During the interview, he was given many opportunities to correct the false statements. They revisited all the lies they knew he told, and they used the exact words that he used. And when Flynn was confronted with his own words, he said he didn't remember. He didn't remember saying, or if he said it, or the exact words that he had used. He didn't understand anything. So then Peter Strzok used the exact words that Flynn had used to prompt a response. But Flynn would not correct his statements, would never. And they said he was very cool and he was very composed. And he was jocular and he was joking around with them. And so they thought, he's not lying, because look at him. He's just so cool and composed and he has none of the indices of somebody who's lying. And yet they wrote he was lying. He absolutely was, because there's intercepted stuff from Kislyak clearly texting him, clearly talking to him, and a new meeting that they didn't even know about in private with Kislyak. And they said, that McCabe also asked Flynn, after he asked him, will you be willing to speak to 2 FBI agents? And he agreed. And they also said that at any time during the interview, he could have said, on advice of counsel, or I don't have counsel, or whatever it is, And he never, ever said that. He was just laughing and joking around because he knew them. He knew them because they had worked together. And so they said, hey, he knew lying would be, a crime, and he did it anyway.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
Sarah, how is the president responding to the former FBI director saying that President Trump, is undermining the rule of law?
I think the last person that we're going to take any lecture from about the values of this country is from a self-admitted liar and leaker that we know James Comey to be. There's no doubt that he did a tremendous number of things wrong and brought outrageous corruption to the FBI. He led it with a political bias that is unheard of at an agency like that. And so he'll be the last person that we're going to take any type of lecture from. What we know is that we're fighting every single day to make America better for the people of this country. It's why the president is so focused on making sure we have a strong economy, getting good trade deals, defeating ISIS, remaking the judiciary, and fighting for border security like we are seeing him do this week, like you've seen him do every day since he took office. This is a president who's fully committed to supporting and reflecting the values of the American people, and we certainly won't be lectured by James Comey about that.
That is sick, okay? That's twisted. There is something so freaking wrong. And, James Comey yesterday was called up to Capitol Hill again, not to talk about Flynn, not to talk about this Russia investigation, not to talk about, how crazy that he had to brief the president on a dossier that actually accused the president of having, prostitutes. He had to do all these things. He had to send Sally Yates had to go to the White House, and Sally Yates had to tell the White House counsel, Don McGahn, that the national security advisor that the president picked was also compromised by the Russians. Oh, my God. And she's saying that there's something wrong with Comey. Listen, every aspect of this president's life, from the very beginning of his, lying, from the very beginning of the Trump organization, has been nothing but payoffs and bribes and mafia deals and, hiring fixers and selling to, Russian shell companies and people being killed in front of Trump Tower who are Russians that didn't have the money for, to make restitution as ordered by a court, but somehow could afford a Trump Tower apartment and end up dead in the front of Trump. I mean, seriously. And now you have the Trump campaign is under investigation. You have the Trump inaugural under investigation. The Trump transition team is under investigation. Now the Trump Foundation today, the Trump Foundation was ordered to agree to liquidate itself. The New York Attorney General, Barbara Underwood, has been looking at the Trump Foundation for self-dealing and paying itself based on, donors giving money to the Trump Foundation for charitable purposes, and finding out that all Trump ever used that money for was either for his campaign or for paying off legal settlements or for just plain, buying paintings of himself. And so they had to stipulate today, before this, the Attorney General managed to get, and who is the Trump Foundation? That's Eric Trump, Trump Jr., Ivanka Trump, Weisselberg, who didn't even know he was on the board, and Donald Trump. That's who the Trump Foundation is. They never had board meetings. They never talked about charitable giving. They never, did anything that a normal charity, a foundation, you want to go after the Clinton Foundation. Oh, God, how we laugh when we look at this pathetic attempt to have a charitable organization by the Trump family. They couldn't give away a nickel, not a nickel, without turning to a salt pillar, okay? I mean, it's just so unbelievable. And so before this happened today, the Trump Foundation they were barred, all the board members, which again is Donald Trump, Eric Trump, Donald Jr., Ivanka, and the CFO of the Trump Organization, Weisselberg, who's cooperating with Mueller, who did not even know he was on the board. They were forbidden from doing any charitable activity for 10 years prior to today. Today, they actually stipulated, meaning that both sides agreed, this foundation has to be liquidated. Because what she wrote was that they were involved in self-dealing. Wait, I want to get her words. Because judges all over this country, are finding them guilty of all kinds of crimes. She said, the agreement to dissolve, signed by both the foundation and the Attorney General Barbara Underwood's office, allows the Attorney General's office to review the recipients of the charity's assets. The most recent tax return filed by the foundation listed its net assets at slightly more than $1.7 million. Quote, our petition detailed a shocking pattern of illegality involving the Trump Foundation, including unlawful coordination. That's conspiracy. Unlawful coordination with the Trump presidential campaign, willing and repeated self-dealing, and much more. This amounted to the Trump Foundation functioning as little more than a checkbook to serve Mr. Trump's political interests and business interests. That's what Barbara Underwood said in her statement on Tuesday. She said, this is an important victory for the rule of law, making clear that there is one set of rules for everyone. We'll continue to move our suit forward to ensure that the Trump Foundation and its directors are held to account for their clear and repeated violations of state and federal law. There's no pardon available for state crimes. Just saying. Just saying. Now, you remember when Donnie Deutsch was saying this the other day? Remember when Donnie Deutsch was saying?
Is there a reaction to the delay in the Flynn sentencing and the rather unusual?
Oh, no, that's not it. Which one's Donnie? I have so many cuts today. It's insane. He's at the end. I know. Thank you. 36. Okay.
We've been focusing, rightfully so, on Russia, on the payments to these women. Let me say this unequivocally. As a guy who spent most of his career in business in New York, in the advertising business, in the real estate business, the fashion business, it's a small world. Donald Trump, in the industry of real estate developers, which is kind of a bit of a slimy business to begin with, was known as the bottom of the bottom of the bottom of the food chain. I have heard story after story. This is a criminal guy. You have to do a dotted line to Letitia Jones, the Attorney General of New York, who came out today and said, oh, we're just starting with his foundation. We're starting with the organization. Russia and those Stormy Daniels and Cameron are the least of his problems.
Right.
To your point, what is going to put him in jail eventually, what is going to destroy everything he's ever built and his children, is a 30-year dishonest criminal enterprise. That is what is one thing will take him out of the presidency. The other thing will ruin him forever. And on top of that, the political incentive for every U.S. attorney in New York or in Virginia to do it is this guy showed up and tried to undo what 250 years of people have been dying for in this country, who we are, what we stand for. So there is a moral imperative.
The rule of law.
The rule, what we are about, what our grandfathers died for, democracy. He single-handedly is the first guy in our lifetime that tried to undo that. And he is going to pay for that the rest of his life as they pick apart his criminal enterprise. This is the very, very beginning of the story.
Okay, so Michael D'Antonio, who we were talking about the other day when I said, I had spoken to Trump biographers, and they all say that Donald Trump doesn't do drugs, although there's a stand-up comedian out there named Noel Castle who actually was a production assistant on The Apprentice, Celebrity Apprentice, and his job as a production assistant was to ferry around all the family members. You have to pick them up and you have to bring them to, the gig. That's what he was doing. And he said that he knows that Donald Trump, A, can't read, and it makes him really, really, feel bad. And so the reason why he can't read is because apparently he has attention deficit disorder so badly that he was prescribed Adderall years ago, and now he uses it like some people use meth. He crushes it up and he snorts it. And that's why he goes crazy and mean tweets and snorts and sniffs and all that stuff that we've seen him do. Okay, but beyond that, Michael D'Antonio, like I said, told me, I know a lot of things about Donald Trump, but I don't think he's a drug addict. And a lot of people have said that. Tony Schwartz, who wrote The Art of a Deal with Donald Trump, he says no. I think Tim O'Brien, who also wrote a biography, he says that Donald Trump isn't a drug addict. I don't know, but what we do know is that Michael D'Antonio does understand that Donald Trump's organization is and has been for years and years been a criminal organization, okay?
The president has wanted to draw a red line and say, you can't look at my business. But if the president's business is trying to curry favor with the Kremlin, we can't ignore that. And the president should not be in a position to say, you can't investigate certain things, only other things that I don't care as much about. So that's what I mean. If Mueller is not looking into this, and I don't know whether he is, someone needs to, because otherwise we're being derelict with our security.
Is the president in for a rude awakening when Democrats take over the House?
Well, he is, and if they go back far enough, they're going to discover amazing things. I mean, the number of Russian mobsters who are investing in Trump properties is stunning. There was a fellow who went into one of Trump's buildings, actually bought the unit right below Kellyanne Conway's unit. He invested in it, sold it a month later for a $500,000 profit. A year after that, he gets shot to death on the sidewalk in New York City. There is such a mess in this Trump organization. There are so many frauds to be investigated, so many crimes to be investigated. In 2015, the Trump Taj Mahal paid a $10 million fine for laundering money through the casino. This is 2015. And they had to confess to this practice going on for years. So I think Congressman Schiff is absolutely right. There's a red line they should march across and deploy the troops in all directions.
Wow. David, did you want to respond to that? I had a question for you here, but I thought you wanted to respond.
Well, I think Michael's exactly right about that. And let's remember two important things about Trump Tower. Right underneath Donald's triplex, there was a full-blown gambling operation that ran for years, run by Russian gangsters, until the FBI shut it down. And Donald was, what? There's gambling going on in my building? And the other was when Donald's close business associate for whom he did favors, the international cocaine smuggler, Joe Wexelbaum, got out of jail. He didn't have money to pay his federal fine. I think it was $30,000, but somehow ended up living in a multi-million-dollar Trump Tower apartment. There are just so many of these sorts of stories, the ones Michael mentioned and the one I did, and there are others, that will lead to all sorts of corruption around Trump involving money and money laundering.
Yeah. We have seen, earlier this year, remember the Trump University thing? Over the class action lawsuit from the Trump University?
$25 million.
Right? So we've seen it when it's scrutinized in court, there is an outcome that's not always good for Trump.
Well, this is the big problem with the man who's also called Individual One, is that so much of what he did was based on the assumption that I'll never be investigated, that I'm operating these 500 different private companies, all trading back and forth with each other. What about the entity that the Trump family created that marked up renovations and supplies sold to Trump buildings, and then raised the rents based on those marked up rates of investment in these properties? And those rents are still high now. Years after they've sold the building, tenants are still paying more than they should be paying in these buildings because of a fraud perpetrated by the Trumps.
Unfreaking believable. Oh, I have to apologize. I got my mobsters mixed up. It's Wexelbaum, the cocaine dealer, is the one who didn't have the money to pay restitution to the court and yet had the money to buy an apartment in Trump Tower, not the Russian mobster who showed up dead on the sidewalk after he bought his Trump Tower apartment, turned around, flipped it for $500,000 profit, and then a year later ended up dead on the sidewalk in New York. I'm sorry. I'm getting my my mobsters mixed up, the American ones with the Russian ones. My coke dealers, I'm mixing up with my casino, fraudsters. The money launderers who used the Trump casino to launder Russian mob money. And then had a big ticket gambling thing in Trump Tower. Go to RandiRhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.